Welcome to the Secrets of Confident Women podcast, where you'll learn all the best tips, tricks, and practical techniques for building the confidence levels you've always wanted. With inspiring interviews, real-life examples, and game-changing insights, this podcast is for women who know that mastering the skill of confidence is one of the most important things they'll ever do.
Hi, this is Jodie Bruce Clarke, your host of the Secrets of Confident Women podcast. And today we are discussing the very real and debilitating concept of overthinking. Now, overthinking is not something that I particularly struggle from regularly, but probably like most people, there have been certain periods of my life where I have been plagued by it. Usually it's to do with a particular situation I found myself in or a decision I need to make that's high stakes. I would say that I'm a very considered person, meaning I think things through thoroughly and consider alternatives and the potential consequences of my actions, but I don't usually get myself into what I would consider to be a state of overthinking. I do, however, work with many clients who would definitely identify as overthinkers. And that's because the long-term effects of overthinking can and often does erode your confidence. Clients are generally stuck, they're paralysed, unable to make a decision, unable to move into action, and therefore the self-doubt rises, the negative thinking rises, and it just goes round and round and round. I call it the mouse wheel because it's just like the little mouse on the wheel going round and round, running faster and faster and getting absolutely nowhere. Now, there's overthinking about the past or there's overthinking about the future. I tend to find the perfectionist clients are often the overthinkers about the future because it's their fear of failure and their need to be perfect that takes over. And then I've worked with clients who are overthinkers about the past. I once worked with a client who was absolutely consumed by thoughts about a presentation she did once where her hands were shaking while she stood at the lectern. Over and over, she laboured on thoughts of who could see her hands shaking and what those people thought of her. Which, you know what, it's fine to a point, but this particular presentation had been 18 months earlier. So for 18 months, she was still consumed by thoughts of that event, and they were stopping her from moving ahead in her career. Eventually, I worked with her to accept that she was the only person on the planet that was still thinking about that presentation. Her overthinking was useless, unproductive, and actually harmful to her life now. Oh, and then there's the mind readers, those that believe they know what someone else is thinking. This is an easy place to go to and often a topic of conversation with my coaching clients, with my friends, and with my kids. And I also check in on this with myself often. Over and over, round and round, running on that mouse wheel, trying to work out what someone else thinks and getting nowhere. So whether you identify as a serial overthinker or an occasional mouse wheel participant, today is going to give you an insight into how to move forward when overthinking strikes. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Rosemary Gattuso. Rosemary has been in alternative dispute resolution for over 15 years, specialising in family mediation and restorative justice practices. Merging her experience as a family mediator with her study of neuroscience and trauma, she wrote a book that explores trends in managing personal adversity and proposes a strength-based tool for self-reflection. As a chronic overthinker, Rosemary experienced firsthand the transformative impact of rewriting overthinking into strengths reflection and is committed to sharing this with the world. I can't wait to hear her insights and expertise on the topic. So, Rosemary, welcome to the Secrets of Confident Women podcast.
Thanks, Jodie. Thanks for having me and thanks for the wonderful introduction. It was really interesting to listen on your take and your experience of overthinking.
When your profile came through to us, and I was like, oh, yes, overthinking, because it's something I discuss a lot. It's something that I think we, as I said in the beginning, we all sort of have moments of that we can find ourselves stuck in a place of overthinking. And then there's the serial or chronic overthinkers like yourself and many of my clients that just fall into that, that place. So I knew this was going to be a topic that would be so valuable for people to get an insight into. So it's going to be really interesting to hear your info and your take on it today. So let's start in telling us a little bit about yourself and your business and your new book.
Well, I mean, initially I started off with a legal background. It's one of those situations where I found out what I was good at and also where I found my path or where to go by getting what I didn't want or what wasn't for me. So because it was quite obvious to me that I wasn't going to be a solicitor, or not that I wasn't going to be one, but it didn't highlight my strengths. It more so highlighted my weaknesses.
Right.
And so it was going through that process and doing the practical training that was compulsory at the very end of legal studies that I was introduced to mediation. And it was a practice that really highlighted my strengths and that most other people in the class really hated and thought it was a waste of time.
Right.
So it was when, I realized this is where I'm meant to be. So then I followed the path of what then was referred to as alternative dispute resolution. And they say alternative because it's alternative to the judicial system or going to court. But I mean, even though I didn't want to, not that I didn't want to, but I knew that I would never be a great solicitor or lawyer, I was always interested in working with families.
Right.
So I always had that base. So then becoming a family mediator just came natural. That was the natural sort of progression. And the more I started working with families, the more interested I became in looking at child development and trauma and behaviour and the reasons why people respond in certain ways. Because I was seeing families, say, in one mediation room having a certain outcome, whereas a family in another mediation room with very similar circumstances having a very, very different outcome.
Right.
So that really interested me as to how, we have so much diversity, but the underlying themes were quite similar across the board.
Yeah, right. And then what did you see what were the strengths that were highlighted in that from I guess, being a solicitor?
My ability to listen and I say listen, but it's really listen and understand and be able to reflect back without that element of judgment.
Yeah, right.
Because if you look at the legal system is about, you question someone in a way to prove a point so that you can win.
Right, yeah.
You really put forward your evidence in a particular way to support your narrative. Whereas I always found it hard to take sides generally. I've being more neutral seemed to feel a lot smoother and easier for me rather than to be more definite, and especially when it was obvious that it would mean one person was right and one person was wrong or whatever it is. So that element was a lot easier, came more natural to me to just listen, reflect back and be, I guess, present without a motive.
Yeah. And what inspired you to write the book and turn to be an author?
Yes. Well, I mean, I'd always been writing stories, fiction.
Okay. Yeah.
I liked writing. So I ended up writing a book about a woman and her challenges and her struggles and her strengths and the contrast in her life where she had exceeded in many areas and then others was having sort of repeat problems and overthinking and worries.
Right.
And so I wrote that book, and then I had a one chapter at the end of that book that was a self-help chapter based on the main character.
Right.
And the tool for self-reflection that had arisen as a part of that story. Then as part of my publishing journey, I realised that I couldn't have a book that was fiction and non-fiction in one. So I rewrote that whole I rewrote that last chapter, that self-help chapter, into one book, essentially.
Right.
Really informed by my observations as a mediator and how people manage adversity and the studies, the self-guided studies that I was doing in trauma and, you know, the brain science behind trauma and child development. Basically, what I sort of saw as the evidence to back up what I was seeing in the mediation room.
Yeah, great. Okay, and we're going to get to hear a lot more about your book and your insights into that. But first, we ask all of our guests on the show about what confidence or being a confident woman means for you.
Well, for me, it means believing in myself.
Great.
Because when you believe in yourself, it's easier to pursue your goals and dreams and, you know, be influenced less or take on board less what other people are thinking or saying about what you're doing.
Yes.
Or what you're proposing to do. I believe in myself so that I am more resilient when I do manage adversity.
Yeah.
I believe in myself so that I can learn from my mistakes rather than beat myself up.
Yes.
And I can believe in myself even when other people doubt me.
Yeah. Because everyone's got an opinion, right? It's easy for everyone to share that. And if you don't have that belief in yourself and that internal resilience, then you can get swayed really, really quickly. And that's where the self-doubt can really, really take over. When are you the most confident version of yourself, Rosemary?
I would say it's when I'm doing things that support my belief in myself.
Right.
So
good.
Essentially, if I'm doing things that highlight my strengths and anything that really, like even when I'm writing a to-do list and I'm ticking off those tasks, you know, I'm a big to-do lister.
Oh, same.
I've written an article about it. I've done a lot of speaking about it. And it's those types of practices, they build on how much you believe in yourself because I'm ticking off tasks.
Yeah.
I feel accomplished.
That's right.
You know?
I do too. Anastasia and I still go on about we're still the paper. Like I've tried to do the online to-do list things, but you tick it, it just doesn't feel the same. Yeah. Like I still need to use the paper and the highlighter. Like
yeah, I'm with you on that.
And I even sometimes put something on that I've already done that if I did it 5 minutes earlier, I still write it on and tick it off.
Too. It's about acknowledging the strengths because I talk about using a strength-based approach. And so there's essentially two ways that I categorize, our thoughts, feelings, and actions about ourselves or about others. And it's either we focus on what's wrong or we focus on what's strong.
Yeah.
So anything to help build my confidence is going to be anything that focuses on my strengths and what's working well in my situation.
I think that is a really key point because people do often just focus on the weaknesses or where they're not strong, and try to focus on getting better at those. But then that can sort of work against you a little bit. You've got to really try and focus on where you're good and the strengths and not necessarily have those weaknesses as such or the things you're not, don't have a tendency for or what have you to be your main focus all the time. So
that's right. Because when we do focus on what's wrong with ourselves, with our situation or whatever's happening, that's where we're focusing directly on the lacking or our own deficit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's harder to sort of see the benefit or see the strength because we're really putting more priority on what's going wrong.
Yeah.
But if we can flip that then to see what is the benefit from that weakness or that perceived deficit or lacking or whatever the situation is, then that can help to change our perspective and our view of our own weaknesses.
Love it. Okay, so we're going to get into some of the ideas about your book and, your experience as a chronic overthinker. I love that term. So why do some people have a tendency to be overthinkers?
I've already mentioned this idea of classifying all thoughts, feelings, and actions under what's wrong and what's strong. And essentially, overthinking is when we analyze a situation with a focus on what's wrong.
Yeah.
So if maybe we were raised in a household where the default was to criticize or to judge, or even looking at households where there was perfectionism.
Right.
Because where there's perfectionism, there's also, not good enough. So it's any sort of default way of being that really focused on a needing improvement or not good enough.
Yeah.
That can also lead to overthinking when you use the definition of overthinking as an analysis that focuses on what's wrong. And that can be past or present. It can be an assumption. It doesn't have to be a real or an actual situation that has taken place. And then biologically, we were built to really be on the lookout for danger and to anticipate threat. So it's easier to then expect the worst case scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
And then some people are also going to be more sensitive to their environment generally, whether or not that is because of their experience or they are, biologically highly sensitive. And it doesn't matter the reason for it because the outcome is still the same.
Right, yeah. Is overthinking a habit?
I think it is. It is a habit because a habit is something that becomes your sort of routine and your default.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I say is that if you can overthink, then you have the capacity to be very good at reflecting and self-reflection, because I define self-reflection or just reflection generally as an analysis of a situation that focuses on what's strong, on the strength. So if you can overthink, then you can reflect. It's just about what is the spotlight focusing on?
Yeah.
Is it highlighting what's wrong or what's strong? That's the real difference. And each has a very different feeling.
Yeah.
So when you are focusing on what's wrong, you tend to stay more in the past and it's harder to move forward. It's harder to forgive. So there's more punishment, blame, criticism, beating yourself up.
Yes.
And it's hard to then believe in yourself.
Yeah. And that's exactly what was happening with my client that was just still talking about this presentation from 18 months earlier. It just was consuming. All she could think about was that moment. And we had to work hard to get her to write a list of what the other things she did good on that day or what to change that focus. But I think that was that habit thing. She just got caught in that way of thinking and just couldn't break it. That's all she could see. It just took over her.
And then if you look at habits generally, if you're a smoker, for example, we know that if you're a smoker, it's very hard to quit smoking.
Yes, yeah.
So then the same for overthinking. You really have to work at it and practice it to undo the habit.
Yeah.
So it's about rewriting the narrative when it comes to overthinking. So I normally focus on what's wrong. How can I focus on what's strong? And in saying that, it's not about focusing on what's strong 24/7.
No.
That's impossible.
Yeah.
Because there's also opportunity in reflecting on when we have focused on what's wrong, when we have been overthinking and making assumptions and overanalyzing things, we can learn from that.
Absolutely. So how do we catch ourselves overthinking and then what do we do about it? Like if we know we're overthinkers or we're even, as I said, I don't really identify probably as a serial overthinker or a chronic overthinker, but I do have those moments. So how do I catch myself when I'm taking it too far as such? Yeah. And then what do I do?
Well, I think we firstly can take cues from how we're feeling about a situation. Yeah. Because it's generally dense, heavier, it's consuming, it's stopping us from maybe moving forward and making decisions. So just that awareness that, okay, I'm doing it now.
Yes.
Then, okay, how can it be flipped so that the focus moves from what's wrong to what's strong? And I find those two categories a very easy way to identify and even just to name it. Sometimes it's just, oh, okay, I'm going into overthinking mode.
Yes.
Maybe let's just not make a decision today or try to sort of take a step back. Or looking at what's the benefit, and I would tend to overthink the fact that I make a long time to make decisions. Right. That's one of them. Because I will think about all the possible scenarios and the options and analyze and look at the pros and the cons of each. But if I look at, well, what's the benefit of that? Well, the benefit of that is that I make an informed decision.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's where I was saying about, like, I'm very considered. I just bought a new dryer. I know this.
Oh, gee, that would have been.
But I cannot just like go out and buy a new dryer like today. I need to do some and honestly, this is something that has changed as I've got older for some reason. But whatever I'm doing, I need to be considered and I need to think about things. I'm not impulsive. I probably was a little bit more when I was younger, but I'm not impulsive on lots of things because I want to check in on how it's going to turn out. Am I buying the right thing for the right day, for the right, place in my laundry? Even with business stuff, if I do this, what are the alternatives? That's probably a smart way to operate, being considered and thinking about things thoroughly. But then it's where that balance, where being considered and looking at options and what have you is healthy and beneficial. But then at some point, you've got to make a decision and move to that next stage.
If it's stopping the decisions being made, then that's where it can be a little bit debilitating because it's stopping you moving forward and keeping you in the past. So, but when you sort of see it as, well, I make an informed decision. I look at what my options are and I want to get the best outcome for me. That doesn't feel heavy. That feels like a smart thing, like a logical thing, a reasonable thing to do.
That's right.
And then when you're ready to make the decision. So I guess that's part of the rewriting because it doesn't feel like a weakness. It doesn't feel like, oh, no, I'm doing it again. It's, okay, I've got something to do. This is my process and this is the end result.
Yeah. And I think sometimes if I do get into that overthinking or when clients have, it really is, I think what you said before about sometimes just taking a step back, going, okay, I'm not making a decision just now. Like I've gone into that mouse wheel place. The thoughts are just going round and round. And it gets to that point where the thoughts are going round and round and that you're not getting a resolution. Like you're not getting anywhere. But then maybe coming back to it the next day or a week later and sitting down and then writing things out and having a more structured process about trying to take those crazy thoughts or, the round and round part and put it out in a more logical process to be able to see, well, that's probably likely never to happen, even though I've been thinking about it for a week. But to sort of get into that place, that can sometimes help you to work through that overthinking mode. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely right. And even sometimes it's just about that awareness of I'm doing it now. Okay. And then the time between, starting to overthink and that awareness will get smaller and smaller and smaller in some cases. In some situations, it'll still be because they're big, but it's also about rewarding yourselves for the time that it's not. And I mean, I guess that's how I came to write a book about it because there's so much in there. And I've got, reflection tasks to really break down our thoughts, feelings and actions, whether what they come under what's wrong and what's strong.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And that's what people need is those tools to go once you realise, okay, I've gone into that overthinking or I'm someone who has a tendency to overthink everything, then you do need to have those tools on hand to try to work yourself through it so that you can still move forward and make decisions and make choices for your life without feeling that stuck or paralysis for extended periods of time.
That's right. And I think one of the points that you raised in the introduction about making assumptions, that's a big one and one that I'm guilty of.
Yes. Oh, we all are, I'm sure.
And I guess for me, coming from a legal background where everything is quite evidence-based, then what it really highlighted for me is that I was really running with ideas, scenarios and things that were completely made up, that would not be admitted in court. So that started getting me to use the rules of evidence in terms of, would this evidence be admissible in court? And then if it's not, then why am I just dwelling on it? And essentially anything that's gossip, an opinion, an assumption, anything that can't be verified by a person or a situation, like we don't know right or wrong. I mean, that disregards intuition, which is an exception to the rule and another another conversation. But when we are in that overthinking mode and making negative assumptions that stop us moving forward, then if we say, okay, can I apply the rules of evidence? Would it be admissible in court? It's an assumption. It's an opinion. It's hearsay. It's he said, she said, it's gossip. No. Why am I letting it get me down? Why am I letting it control what I do or not do?
Yes, exactly. And I often work with clients around finding the evidence in their past that debunks where they're caught. Like I'm working with a client at the moment, and she's an amazing woman who used to run triathlons and do like really, really strong motivation, physical, sport-based, what have you. And now she's trying to start a business. And she got caught in I'm not going to be able to do this. This isn't a thing. And I was like, have you ever really failed at anything that you've put your mind to? Like, really? And when we started to go back and find like the evidence of how she deals with adversity, how she deals with challenge, how she deals with keeping motivated, how she deals with setting herself a goal and achieving it, there was literally no evidence in her past that she's someone who would not be able to do this. So it's like bringing some of those, what you're saying about the evidence, finding the evidence of who you are. Like if you're not that person that would if you're someone who really can set a goal and achieves it and works hard towards it, then why would you think that that's going to change? You know what I mean? So I love that evidence-based idea, because we forget who we are sometimes and all the great things that we can achieve. So I help clients like bring that back to the forefront and go, oh yeah, actually I am someone who could do that, you know?
And it helps to rewrite the story that they've given themselves.
It is, yeah. So in your book, you discuss how the quality of our thoughts are reflected in our physical world, and conversely, our physical world gives us the clues to the quality of our thoughts. So how do we recognize the impact our thoughts are having on our physical world?
Good question. And I guess I can refer back to my mediation clients as an obvious example, because we have two families with almost identical situations, or challenges to get through, but very different outcomes. And what I noticed is that where the focus was on what's wrong,
right,
then it's like you take that path, and once you're on that path, you get more and more evidence to support that narrative, and it just accumulates.
Right.
And then when you're on that what's wrong path, then it's harder to move forward.
Yes, yep.
More in the past. It's harder to forgive.
Yes.
It's hard. And I mean, if you look at, I work with separating parents who have to form a co-parent, where it's safe to do so, a co-parenting relationship, and work together and show some kind of alliance for the benefit of the children. But where there is a lot of grief and hurt, and which is sort of normal, it's a big ask separating parents to say, well,
can you get on and and make decisions and agree?
And also I think society's views have changed. It was okay to blame and criticize and even alienate one child from one parent because of XYZ. Whereas now it's more about the benefit of the child of having a relationship with both parents. But, there was a very big difference in outcomes depending on the perspective. And I also saw that in, say, people who going into rehabilitation for some kind of addiction.
Right.
Right? Because you go into rehab, then you've got this intense therapy and environment. But not everyone who comes out of rehab is then sort of sober, I guess.
Yeah.
Or, then that got me thinking, well, what is the difference? It's not just the physical actually being there. It has to come down to our thoughts as well.
Right, yeah. So you're saying that where the physical world, what you're seeing then is the reflection of, well, I must be on either this path, the what's wrong, or I'm what's strong. So that can determine, because if you just keep walking the what's wrong path, it doesn't turn into a better path, really, the more you walk down it.
It's like the more you walk down that path, the more evidence you receive to support that narrative. And then once you are in that view, it's harder to see. And when everything's going wrong, it's harder to acknowledge and appreciate the one thing that's worked well, or to even see the benefits in the way things have panned out.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why, as a mediator, I could see examples of similar scenarios with very different outcomes.
Yes.
And the difference was really that perspective that was multidimensional. It wasn't just, oh, yes, I say that I'm over it, or I've forgiven him or her, or that I'm actually reflecting it in my actions and in how I feel about a situation, and it's then being shown in my external environment.
Yes.
Because I found that if one of those thoughts, feelings, or actions aren't on the same path, then it's harder to then take that path, and it'll be reflected in the experience.
Yeah. How do we get them back on like a different path? Is it that, are you helping them to see the path they're on to try to change that path? Like what I do is trying to find their evidence from the past for them to see that the self-doubt or the negative thinking that they're caught in probably isn't evidence-based at that stage. So is it usually someone else helping us to move to another view, getting that different perspective? If we're blinkered or we're focused on always that what's wrong, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, how do we move to another place?
Well, I think there's no one answer for one individual.
Yeah.
For many, it's about engaging with coaches, counselors, mediators, whoever it is, or having a teacher or a friend or a mentor who is more aligned to what's strong, so that they can show you that actually that isn't. Because if all your friends and the people around you support that.
Yes, which often happens.
Yeah. And I mean, I found, when I was much younger, I was in that sort of friendship circle, and you don't realise and you don't know. Yeah. It's just, that's how it's supposed to be. That's just how it is.
Yeah. Yes.
And then it's until there's someone else that shows you that there could be a different way. That's all it takes. Or, it could be also about doing practices that help you believe in yourself, because that's also a big component. Because when you believe in yourself, it's easier to make that flip from what's wrong to what's strong without being as hard on yourself.
Yes, very true.
And then to not take on other people's, view of what's wrong with your situation. You don't take it on. So it's also about things that build our sense of self.
Yes.
So like that to-do list.
Yeah.
Or any sort, even physical activity that you enjoy, doing the things. If you're creative, doing those things. If you like meditating or mindfulness, it's about building up whatever you can. That's part of the equation. Then if you are someone that reads books, then you'll be drawn to, or even, there's people online that you can watch or listen to, podcasts, anything that you're aligned to. And then the practices, the practitioners, the people out there that can help. It's a whole sort of range of things. And I guess the idea with my book is to have the practices in there.
Yes.
And it's self-paced, self-guided. So to give you tools, and then if there's someone that you're aligned with, or, your next door neighbor or a teacher, or, someone that you can talk to, or someone that shows you what's strong in life, really.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about how important the people around you are, because you can get caught in that self-fulfilling prophecy of bad and negative, what's wrong with the world. Whereas then you've got a whole other group of people that are, optimistic and positive and go-getters and action takers and doing, and sometimes it's you just need to sort of find maybe another person or another group or someone else that just has a different view of life to help you see the other side, because we all get blinkered in the way we see the world and with the way we see ourselves and the way we see situations, and someone else can help us see a different perspective.
That's right. And then not everything is all roses, and we can't expect to be on that positivity and the what's strong path the whole time. That would just put us up for failure.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just more about how can we learn from the situation? How can this make us more resilient? And then it's okay to, rather than beating ourselves up, we look at, okay, that was the past. Now I'll get another chance in the future and I'll do it different.
Yes. So that's like leading into my final question about how do we transform our negative self-talk into empowering personal growth and resilience is that level of reflection and, being smart about reflection, not just going into the place of I'm wrong, I'm beating myself up constantly, but it's really taking the view of trying to learn from that. What has it taught me? But then moving on, not getting stuck like my client who got stuck for 18 months, still thinking about her hand shaking at a lectern. That was just unproductive. But, taking what she can learn from that to the next plate. How do we turn that negative thinking or that self-reflection and turn it positive or turn it into a personal growth moment?
Yeah. And I think we have to remember that it takes people a while to get to learn the habit of overthinking. So to transform it also takes time.
Yes.
And there are going to be some areas that are easier to flip than others, and some situations and times in our lives where it's going to be harder. And that's okay. I think it's more about being respectful and acknowledge our strengths and also acknowledging how far we've come, because it's about looking at our achievements in comparison to how we were last year, or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and just keep practicing, keep moving forward, and, have a future focus rather than the past. Well, that was the past.
Yes.
If we're thinking about the past, then it's harder to make future connections and future possibilities.
And I think it's also that some decisions are high stakes, like a big career move or a company change or something. With career women that I work mostly with, some of the decisions are really going to change lives, like their lives. So they sometimes need to have a bit more overthinking or a bit more considered focus, whereas other decisions or other choices that you're going to make don't necessarily need that level of intensity. I think it's like things like in your book with the practices, if you start applying them to some of the smaller things that you get caught in, or the overthinking about the smaller decisions or things that don't need as much, reflection, but start using those tools, because then when the high stakes decisions come along, you've already got a practice. You've got tools at hand that can help you when, those situations come along, or those big high-stake choices that come along in our lives.
That's right. And I guess it comes down to how much you believe in yourself, because when you have a strong sense of self and you believe in yourself more, then it's easier to manage those situations. And even if you overthink, so what? It was a life-changing decision. I had to really make that, look at all the options and get advice, and it consumed, my mind for that period of time. But the resilience level is just that little bit higher.
That's right.
That it's not going to feel as heavy. And it's not about feeling heavy when you're in the middle of that overthinking. It's feeling heavy when you're thinking about how you process that situation.
Yes.
Because that we can really dwell on and into our future. That dwelling on that past.
Yeah. But it's really take the learning, as I said, take the learning and move the hell on. Come on. It's just don't get caught. Just know what you needed to learn and then get back focused on the future again.
And also don't be so hard on yourself at times when it's challenging to actually look at the learning, or you don't want to.
Yes.
That's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. Okay, so at the end of all of our podcasts, Rosemary, we ask our Rise Women Power questions, and then at the end of each season, we do a big compilation of all the answers. It's really a great episode. So what do you, Rosemary, wish every woman knew?
I would say it's that there are no endings, only new beginnings.
Oh, nice. Love it. And what is your superpower?
I would say it's my patience.
Oh, well, there you go. That's something I definitely do not identify with. I'm terrible with patience. And we've got a whole shoe thing going on. It's a long story. But are you a heels or a flats girl?
I'm a flats girl, actually. I used to be a heels girl. I'm quite tall.
Oh, there you go. I am too. But yeah, as we're getting old, I sort of do more flats now too. But
I think it was really the lockdowns that did it for me.
yeah, that's right. We all got too comfy cozy now. Your favourite quote or rule that you live by?
I would say it would be to have no regrets.
Yes.
And that's aligned with the idea of, there's no mistakes, there's only learning opportunities. So no regrets.
No regrets. Take the learning and move the hell on. Who inspires you and why?
I'm quite inspired by mothers, nurturers, carers, anyone who is really in a position to look after someone who's more vulnerable than them.
Yeah, we need those people in the world for sure. And finish this sentence. If I had even more confidence than I do now, I would
do karaoke.
Oh, there you go. Now, Rosemary, I have never had someone have that answer on this podcast, and I've interviewed lots of people. Do karaoke. Yeah. What's stopping you?
Well,
confidence.
Look, I'm not a good singer. I used to play piano, and part of my piano exam meant that I had to sing.
Right.
Always really terrible, and I was always off key.
Yeah.
So I know I'm a bad singer.
But you love it.
I know I'm a bad singer, so I'm like, well, I'm not going to do karaoke. I'll pay to listen to singers, but
well, I think you can go to those karaoke places now where it is just about singing at the top of your voice in an enclosed room and having a great time and not worrying about how you sound, because I think there's lots of terrible singers. Okay, well, there's your challenge. This year you got to do some karaoke.
Okay.
Look, thank you so much for your insight and your expertise. We'll put a link on our show notes to your book so people can go there. So, listeners, if you are a serial or chronic overthinker, go and get Rosemary's book for some tools and some help about how you can move through that. But we really, really thank you for coming on the podcast today and giving us your insights and expertise about something that so many of us deal with.
Great. Thanks, Jodie. It's been lovely chatting with you.
You too. And thank you to everyone for listening today. And remember, there are so many ways that we can help you become the confident woman you've always wanted to be. So please get in touch or visit us at risewomen.com. We want to ensure that confidence is every woman's new normal by getting our programs and resources out to as many women as possible. So until next time, remember, with confidence, anything is possible. Bye for now.